EastEnders George Knight, Colin Salmon, and Nicola Mitchell, Laura Doddington, haven't had an easy ride to get to where they are, and things don't seem as though they'll get any easier. Though they'd earlier flirted with the idea of a relationship after a fling, George ultimately called time on their union as both his brother, Kojo Asare Deo Koleosho, and Nicola's son Harry Elijah Holloway, found themselves ensnared in Ravi Gulati's Aaron Thiara, fledgling drug enterprise. Nicola, though, had fallen pregnant as a result of their tryst, and she initially chose to confide only in Honey Mitchell, Emma Barton. As the drug ring situation came to a head amid Kojo and Harry's escape, Nicola was forced to finally confess to George that she was carrying his baby, and when a medical emergency later resulted in Nicola needing an emergency scan, the emotion felt between them saw them agree to continue with the pregnancy. Nicola later went into premature labor, then faced an incredibly traumatic situation when her flu symptoms meant she was unable to visit or even hold her baby. Through it all, George remained a tower of strength for her as he rediscovered all of his previous feelings for her. And as baby Ivy remained in hospital, he declared his love for her. Unable to process this amid all of the difficulties surrounding Ivy's birth, Nicola was originally unable to reciprocate and suggested to George that they focus on co-parenting. After a thorough talking to from Harry, though, she gave in to her feelings, admitted that she loved George too, and they settled into a proper relationship. Their next challenge came in the form of George's adoptive father, Eddie Knight Christopher Fairbank, who desperately tried to contact his son following his hospitalization. Taking the lead, Nicola found him in the hospital and initially told him that George wanted nothing to do with him, but the revelation that Eddie was dying rocked her. When George discovered his dad's re-emergence, he initially vowed to have nothing to do with the vile, racist murderer, though when Nicola discovered how deeply in debt her nightclub had become, Eddie's promise of a cash injection saw her forge an uneasy alliance with him in order to return him home. Though Nicola managed to talk George into allowing Eddie to move into their house, she made sure to leave out the financial incentive he provided, and with both Kojo and George's daughter, Gina Knight Francesca Henry, vehemently opposed to Eddie's presence, she's desperately attempting to keep all of the plates spinning. With George struggling more and more with Eddie's presence, Gina, worried for her dad, is actively seeking out ways to get rid of her granddad for good. Next week at Night Fusion, George is heartened when Gina approaches him, having previously rejected his invitation to attend. His joy is short-lived, though, when she reveals she's merely there to fetch him for Nicola, who's at home and racked with panic over baby Ivy. As George rushes off, Gina is left with Eddie, who she has quite understandably no intention of reconciling with. But what's going on with Ivy? Are George and Nicola looking at even more trauma in the short time they've been parents to their baby against the windows of number 55 like tiny fists demanding to be heard? Inside, panic spread faster than the storm outside as EastEnders favorites George Knight and Nicola Mitchell found themselves facing every parent's worst nightmare. Baby Ivy was gone. Only for a moment. But in Walford, a moment was enough to destroy lives. George paced the living room like a caged lion, his jaw tight, fists clenched so hard his knuckles turned white. The usually calm landlord of the Queen Vic looked seconds away from exploding. "Tell me again," he barked, turning sharply toward Nicola. "Exactly where you left her." Nicola froze under the intensity of his glare. Her mascara had already begun to smudge from tears, and her hands shook uncontrollably as she held Ivy's tiny pink blanket against her chest. "I only looked away for 1 minute," she whispered. "1 minute, George." But George wasn't listening. The front door slammed open as Elaine rushed in from the pub, drenched from the rain. "What's happened?" she demanded. George turned, fury and fear colliding in his eyes. "Ivy's disappeared." The room fell silent. Elaine's face drained of color instantly. "What do you mean disappeared?" "She was in her pram outside the cafe," Nicola cried. "I went inside to grab the bottle warming from the counter, and when I came back, she was gone," George finished grimly. Outside, sirens echoed through Albert Square. Half the residents were already searching. Kat shouted instructions near the market stalls while Phil Mitchell barked at a group of teenagers lingering near the arches. Even Cindy Beale looked rattled as whispers spread from house to house. A missing baby in Walford changed everything. George grabbed his coat. "I'm checking the station again." "You've already checked it twice," Elaine snapped. "And I'll check it again." Nicola suddenly burst into tears. This is my fault. George stopped dead. The anger on his face softened for the first time all evening. No, he said quietly. Don't do that to yourself. But I should have been watching her. You think I don't know that? George interrupted, immediately regretting the harshness in his voice. Nicola looked shattered. The guilt hanging over her was unbearable. Before George could apologize, his phone rang. Everyone froze. George answered instantly. Hello. A crackling silence followed. Then a woman's voice whispered. She's safe. George's eyes widened. Who is this? But the line went dead. Elaine gasped. What did they say? George lowered the phone slowly. They said Ivy's safe. Who? Nicola demanded desperately. I don't know. The atmosphere shifted instantly from fear to suspicion. Someone had taken Ivy, and someone was playing games. An hour later, Walford was crawling with police. Detectives questioned residents while George sat in the Vic's back room replaying every second of the day in his head. He couldn't stop blaming himself. He'd promised he would protect his family after everything they'd already been through. After the lies, the betrayals, the endless Mitchell drama consuming the square. Now an innocent baby was caught in the middle of it all. The door creaked open. Phil Mitchell stepped inside. You look terrible, Phil muttered. Thanks. Phil folded his arms. Police think it's someone local. George looked up sharply. Why? Because whoever took her knew Nicola would leave the pram alone. George's stomach twisted. Someone had been watching. Phil lowered his voice. And there's something else. George stood immediately. What? Couple of people saw a woman near the cafe earlier. Hoodie. Nervous looking. Who was she? Phil hesitated. They think it might have been Jenna. George's blood ran cold. Jenna. Nicola's estranged sister. The same woman who blamed Nicola for destroying their family years ago. No, Nicola whispered from the doorway. She wouldn't. But even she didn't sound convinced. Meanwhile, across the square, a tiny cry echoed inside an abandoned flat. A woman sat rocking baby Ivy gently in her arms. It's okay, she whispered tearfully. I'm not gonna hurt you. The woman pulled back her hood. It was Jenna. Her face was pale and exhausted, eyes swollen from crying. I just needed someone to love me, she admitted softly to the baby. Ivy cried louder. Jenna panicked immediately. No, please don't cry. She fumbled for the bottle she'd stolen from the cafe, trying desperately to calm the baby. Then came a loud bang at the door. Jenna froze. Another bang. Police. Open up. Her breathing quickened. She looked down at Ivy with devastation flooding her face. I didn't mean for this to happen. The door burst open. George stormed in first. The second he saw Ivy alive, emotion crushed him completely. Oh my God. Nicola rushed past him, sobbing uncontrollably as she scooped Ivy into her arms. My baby, my baby. Jenna backed into the corner, trembling. I wasn't gonna hurt her, she cried. I swear. George looked ready to kill her. You took a child. I just wanted Nicola to understand what it feels like to lose everything. Nicola stared at her sister in horror. You kidnapped my daughter because you were jealous? Jenna broke down completely. She has a family, and I've got nobody. Police officers quickly restrained her as she screamed through tears. George held Nicola tightly while Ivy finally settled in her mother's arms. For a moment nobody spoke. The nightmare was over, but the damage remained. Later that night, the Queen Vic stood quieter than usual. Word of Ivy's disappearance had shaken the entire square. George stood alone behind the bar staring into space when Nicola approached carefully. You okay? She asked softly. George exhaled heavily. No, neither was she. Nicola glanced upstairs where Ivy slept safely at last. I keep thinking, what if we hadn't found her? George swallowed hard. But we did. Nicola nodded slowly before stepping closer. You were scared. Terrified. She took his hand gently. And for the first time all day, George allowed himself to breathe. Outside, Albert Square finally settled back into silence. But in Walford, peace never lasted long. Because somewhere in the darkness, another secret was already waiting to explode. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to EastEnders Spoilers Official.